This is a video that I have been working on for quite a while, and I'm excited to finally record and edit and publish. So let's jump into it. This is my list of best games on the Mac 2025 edition. So when I was working on this video and this list of games, one of the first things I did was I hopped into ChatGPT and I typed in, what are the best games on the Mac App Store that support controllers? And it gave me this list. Based on Metacritic average scores, these are considered the best games that are available on the Mac App Store that support controllers. Here's another way of looking at that data. There was 3 games from 2018 to 2020, 5, 21 to 22, and then 8 in 23 to 24, and finally 4 in the year 2025. Clearly, we are seeing an increase in critically acclaimed games coming to the Mac App Store. Before we get into the games that I think are the best available on the Mac App Store, it's important that I detail what I like in a game. My preferred games are action RPGs, like Diablo, like Destiny. I enjoy fast-paced action. FPS is great, single-player focus for the most part, and other games like MMOs and platformers and all that, I do have a lot of different interests. When it comes to games that I tend to not enjoy or I try to avoid, those are games that feature a lot of slow and methodical gameplay. They're filled with a lot of puzzles. I'm not a fan of Souls-likes or roguelikes, gacha, arena, competitive. Those aren't really my things. Historically, I've always been a console-first gamer. I've never really been that interested in PC. There was sort of this stage in my life when I was younger when I was focused on PC, the MapleStory days, I'll call them, but for the most part, it's always been console-first. Ever since about 2022, I've been exclusively on the Mac for gaming, as crazy as that sounds. There has been some cloud gaming in there as well. It's more of a recent thing. And when it comes to the performance I like to see, typically I target about 1440p and I'm looking to get, around 60 FPS. I'm pretty tolerant. I'm not someone who is looking for like 120 or 240 FPS, I don't really care that much. I don't play competitive games, so the frame rate certainly does not have to get that high for me to have an enjoyable experience. As for time constraints, I have limited playtime, so for the most part, I tend to avoid really big games that require a big investment. I'm not a big fan of complex games either. Typically when I sit down to play a game, it's got to be something that I can hop into for a little bit and then hop out of. I don't want to spend a lot of time trying to figure things out. I do not have any family obligations, which at least gives me a bit of time to play games every so often. However, I do have some cats that consume some of my time. Okay, as for the conditions for inclusion, again, I am calling this the best games on Mac, but this is the best games on Mac in my opinion. So firstly, regarding platform, clearly there are Mac games available on several different platforms, the Mac App Store, Steam, cloud gaming, emulation, there's a lot of different options. I am only talking about the Mac App Store in this video. I do have Steam. I have used it to play some games on my Mac. For the most part, though, everything that I play is on the Mac App Store. It's just my personal preference. It's just easier. I don't have to have another application. As for hardware, I play all of my games on an M2 MacBook Air. That is currently all I have available for when it comes to Mac gaming. However, anything that is playable on my M2 MacBook Air, chances are it is playable on an M5, an M4, an M3, or an M1 Mac as well. As for input, I do prefer to play with a controller, and in my case, I have an Xbox controller. That's just my controller of choice. And of course, my personal bias, as I've said on the previous slide, there are certain games that I enjoy more than others. So clearly that's going to factor into the decisions that I make when it comes to which games I think are the best on the Mac. Okay, so this is how I'm going to illustrate and organize my top 10 games, if you will. We have 4 games in the bronze category, 3 games in the silver category, 2 games in the gold category, and 1 in the platinum, diamond, whatever you want to call that, up at the top. Very important to note on the side there, I do have some of those conditions spelled out clearly again. We are only talking about games on the Mac App Store. The game has to support controllers natively. This is not limited to games released in 2025, although many of the games in my list did release in 2025. And the big one, very important to keep in mind, this is according to my preferences. You can like different games, that's perfectly okay. This is what I personally enjoy. Before we get into those top 10 games, I do want to make 4 special mentions right off the start. These did not make my list of top 10 games. However, I still want to do a shout out for them. First one is Cyberpunk 2077. Frankly, this game does not perform well on my M2 MacBook Air. Even with the graphics set to basically as low as they will go, it doesn't perform well. In the open world areas of the city, it does struggle a lot. It even freezes up sometimes. And the gunplay in the game feels a bit clunky. And personally, as someone who really likes agile, smooth feeling gunplay when it comes to action games, that's paramount. And this game doesn't have it, at least not in my experience. The other problem with this game is that it takes a huge time commitment. It's a massive game, it's a massive world, there's so much to do, and the game itself is quite complex. This would have been a game that I'd probably enjoy when I was back in my 20s, but today it's just not for me anymore. However, this is probably the biggest release to come to the Mac, especially the Mac App Store. It's a landmark release. It definitely deserves a mention here. Many people really enjoy this game. Frankly, it's just not for me. The next one we have is Stray. This game has okay performance on the M2. You do need to have the graphics quite low. The game is beautiful, it's artistic, it's this unique cat adventure, platforming, but a lot of puzzles. And as I've already said, I'm not a fan of puzzles, and this game is almost entirely puzzles. It's just not for me. It's an incredible game. It's an incredible experience. It would look really good on a better Mac than an M2, and frankly, I don't think my M2 did it justice, but the game is beautiful. It's just not a game that I personally enjoy. So next up we have Lies of P. Again, okay performance on the M2. You do need to have the graphics set to about mid-low, maybe low if you want to have better performance. It's a Souls-like game at its core. I do not enjoy Souls-like games because they are a bit methodical, a bit slow, but the game itself looks beautiful. The environments are really cool. It has this sort of dark, old European world. But yeah, it's not for me. I'm not a fan of Souls-like titles, but I do believe that this was the first significant Souls-like game to come to the Mac App Store, so it definitely deserves a shout-out. I know a lot of people really enjoy this game. And lastly in the special mentions is Dreamlight Valley. Again, okay performance on the M2. You're going to have probably mid-low graphics, maybe on the lower end. It's a life sim game. I do not enjoy these games at all. You know, you're walking around, you're doing fishing and farming and crafting and all this stuff. For the most part, it just feels like this aimless experience to me. But there are people out there who really enjoy this type of gameplay, so all the power to them. And if you're someone who really enjoys Disney stories and Disney worlds and characters, I mean, it's a no-brainer. The game is really cool from that perspective. It has all this great Disney lore. Again, it's just not for me. It's not my style of game, but I totally respect what the game is, and it definitely deserves a shout out in my special mentions. So moving back into our top 10 games on the Mac, beginning with the category at the bottom here, 4 games in the bronze category. First one is Captain Blood. This is an action game. It was released in 2025 on the Mac App Store. Smaller game, it's about 15 gig in size. Runs well on the M2. You do need to have about mid-low, maybe closer to mid graphics for this game. Fast-paced, action-first gameplay, which, again, you know I enjoy. It's a simple pirate adventure. You know, this game feels like it was ripped straight out of the 2000s, and that's a good thing. It's very nostalgic. There's no bloat. There's no complexity. It's just a fun, hop in, hop out experience. Perfect for short play sessions. It's perfect for someone like me, frankly. Next up, we have the first of the 3 Resident Evil games that I have in my list. This is Resident Evil 2. This one was released in 2024 on the Mac App Store. It is the smallest, I believe, of all the Resident Evil games that are available on the Mac App Store at 25 gig. Runs well on the M2, but you do need to have the graphics basically as low as they'll go. Maybe not as low as they'll go, but definitely on the lower end. Very strong story, very strong world and characters. Frankly, all the Resident Evil games have these characteristics. The story, the world, and the characters are always really, really great, and that is why I enjoy Resident Evil games. However, I do not enjoy survival games, and these games are all survival horror first and action second. And that means that they tend to be more slow. Even though I really enjoy the story and the world and the characters when it comes to Resident Evil, I don't typically enjoy the gameplay. And that's why I have them ranked lower on my top 10 games. Also, these games tend to be filled with a lot of puzzles, and I really dislike puzzles. The reason I have Resident Evil 2, though, ranked lower than the other 2 that are on my list is because of the police station. More than half of the game, you spend it in the police station, and you're just constantly running around in circles, and it starts to feel so repetitive after a while. I didn't really enjoy that. That's why it's at the lower end of my Resident Evil list, but it's still definitely deserving of a top 10 spot. So next up, we have the next Resident Evil game that I have listed. This one, actually, I enjoyed, I thought, the most out of all the Resident Evil games. I was kind of going back and forth between this one and the other one that I'm going to mention next. This one, I think, was the very first Resident Evil that released on the Mac App Store that supported the M chips. Again, runs well on the M2. You do need to have the graphics toned down pretty low. In my opinion, Village had the best story of all the Mac Resident Evil games. Again, totally in my opinion. I found the story very mysterious. It was very compelling. It sort of feels a bit more like a standalone adventure. I think it carries over from Resident Evil 7, but Village felt like a standalone adventure. You really didn't need to play any other games in Resident Evil to make sense of what was going on. The world and the atmosphere of this game was particularly strong. I really enjoyed that. Unfortunately, it still has that survival horror pacing, and it still has a lot of puzzles, and that's why it's lower than the next game that I have listed. And finally, the Resident Evil game that I think is the best available on the Mac App Store, Resident Evil 4. And clearly I'm in good company here because I believe Resident Evil 4 is widely considered to be the best Resident Evil game so far. This is, I believe, the largest of the Resident Evil games at 70 gigs, so you are going to need a lot of storage space in order to download this one. It runs well on the M2. Again, graphics are going to have to be on the lower end if you're going to be playing on this type of hardware. I think this Resident Evil game was probably the most action-focused of the Resident Evil games that I've played so far, and that's why it's ranked so highly, by me anyways. There seems to be a bit less emphasis on the puzzles, and you have a lot more freedom to play aggressively, which I prefer. There's a better balance of action and horror survival. This is definitely my favorite Resident Evil game on the Mac, but it was very close between this and Village. I felt Village had the better story. Resident Evil 4 had the better gameplay. So jumping back to our rankings here, let's slot in those 4 games. So in the bronze category, we do have Captain Blood, and then those 3 Resident Evil games, 2, Village, and 4. So moving up to the silver category now, I have 3 games here. And the first one is Grid Legends. Personally, I'm not a big fan of racing games, but every so often I get this sort of itch where I want to play a racing game. But I'm not someone who really enjoys ultra-realistic racing games. I prefer more casual, open world. Games like Forza Horizon, for example, are fun racing games for me. Grid Legends sort of has that, sort of doesn't have that. Again, clearly a racing game. This one released in 2023 on the App Store. It is of a moderate size at 40 gig. Runs well on the M2. Mid-low graphics are required, probably a bit closer to the lower end if you want to have really good performance. The story itself in this game is particularly strong. There are these amazing live action cutscenes throughout the main story. They basically have a full-length featured film recorded for this game, for the story, and it makes you really feel a part of it. It makes you really feel like a professional racer, which I thought was quite cool. It reminds me a lot of Apple's F1 movie. The gameplay is still very strong, it's very fun, and there's plenty of stuff to do after the story is finished as well. This is definitely the best racing game that I played in several years, and in my opinion, the best racing game that's available on Mac, and that is why it's in my list. So next up we have Wuthering Waves. This is a role-playing game. It released just, I was about to say this year, but released in 2025 on the Mac App Store. This game has an interesting installation thing going on. So if you go onto the Mac App Store, it says that it's 50 gig in size, but after you install the game, there's a patch, and the patch is like 70 to 80 gig on top of the 50. So you are going to need a lot of space in order to install this game, and I think there's regular patches coming out, so just be aware of that. The game runs well on M2. Mid-low graphics again are required in order to have good performance. The game itself it's fast, it's fluid action RPG combat. I really enjoy that. It's very similar to a game like Genshin Impact. However, I feel that the gameplay in Wuthering Waves is a bit better than Genshin. It feels a bit more comprehensive, a bit more action-packed, and the story as well feels a bit more cohesive in Wuthering Waves versus Genshin. I'm not a fan of forced character switching, or character switching at all for that matter. I don't want to play as other characters. I want to play as my character. Also, I know these games are gacha style games. Personally, I just ignore that exists in the game for the most part. It's not something I'm interested in. And next up, we have Prince of Persia: Lost Crown, another action game. Probably can see a theme. This one released in 2024 on the Mac App Store. Moderate size, 30 gig roughly. Runs well on the M2. Medium graphics for this one are good. If you want to have better performance, you might be bumping them down just a bit. This is a 2D side-scrolling action-adventure game, very similar to something like Hollow Knight, which is another one of my all-time favorite games. Lots of platforming, which I enjoy. The game world is beautiful. It feels so expansive and comprehensive, even though it's only 2D, and that's because of this like multiple layered effect that they have going on. The combat is very fast and skill-based, which I really enjoy. There are puzzles in the game, but they are pretty tolerable. There's not too many of them. The one thing that I feel lets this game down is the navigation and knowing where to go next. So the story is very linear, but the world itself isn't. It's kind of like a large open 2D world, and a lot of the times I have no idea where I'm supposed to be going next, so you kind of get lost, and that drives me a bit insane. But other than that, an amazing game, and I knew nothing about this game before installing it, so it was a happy surprise when I installed it, and I realized, wow, this is a lot like Hollow Knight, and that is why it is in my list for the silver category. So we have Grid Legends, Wuthering Waves, and Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. Okay, moving up to the gold category, I have 2 games in here, and the first one that we have up is Control. This was an incredible game. So again, an action game, released in 2025 on the Mac App Store, large game at 50 gig in size. Runs well on the M2, but you are going to have those graphics quite low in order to get the best performance. This is an incredibly unique experience. The environments are constantly changing. They're very surreal. There's all these unique animations going on. That's what makes it run, poorly on an M2, and that's why you need to have those graphics set really low. Frankly, I'm kind of disappointed that I played this on an M2, but I mean, it's all I have. But it did not do this game justice. If I ever get a better Mac, I definitely want to replay this game to better experience the whole environment and the whole story. And speaking of the story is quite confusing at times. In fact, it's confusing throughout the entire thing. But I actually found that confusing aspect of it, it's sort of a good thing. It adds this unique element to the game, and it constantly makes you feel like, I don't know what's going on, and you're so compelled to find out and try to make sense of it. It's a third-person shooter, and out of all the games that I've listed so far that do feature, gunplay, whether it's Resident Evil or Cyberpunk, This one here has the most agile and smooth gunplay, I would say. It's not similar to something like Destiny, which I would say is on the top end of the spectrum when it comes to agile and smooth and really good feeling gunplay. But this one is on the higher end, and frankly, that's probably why I enjoyed the game so much, because that is such an important aspect of action games for me. Definitely one of the most memorable games on the Mac. If you haven't played this game, definitely pick it up. And we got some great news at the recent Game Awards as well. The next installment in this series is coming to the Mac App Store. That's exciting as well. Hopefully I have a better Mac by then so I can experience that appropriately. The last game that I have in the gold category is Dredge. Honestly, I kind of bounced back and forth between this game and the game that I did put in my top spot. I don't know, I was back and forth for the longest time. I actually had Dredge as my number one game, but then in the 11th hour I switched it out, so Dredge is going to be in number 2. Again, adventure game. This one was released in 2025. Very small game. You can see here 1 gig in size. Obviously, it runs flawlessly on the M2. You can have all the graphics settings completely maxed out. No compromises. The game looks really good. The gameplay is very simple. It's incredibly addictive. It sort of has this mobile feel for the gameplay. You know, you're fishing, you're dredging for hidden treasures. It's very simple, but at the same time, even though the gameplay has this mobile-esque feel, the game itself is substantial. So it doesn't feel like a mobile game in a general sense. The story and the world, it's very dark, it's very mysterious, it has this Lovecraftian tone, which I really appreciated. The game itself is very relaxing, but it's also unsettling at times, which is kind of neat. Perfect for short play sessions. Get home from work and you only have 30 minutes to sit down and play a game. You know, this is the kind of game that you're probably going to want to pick up. Unlike something like Control or Cyberpunk, you know, it takes so long just to get into the game and get a mission set up and whatever else, and then the missions are potentially hours long. You know, it's a different type of game. Definitely a really, really unique and amazing experience. Highly recommend this game. Almost my number one if it wasn't for the game that came next. So those are our 2 games in the gold category, Control and Dredge, 2 amazing games. Now we're moving on to we'll call it the diamond category. Again, I was going back and forth between the game that I did put here and Dredge, and I finally landed on something, so drum roll please. Cat Quest 3. So anyone who has been following the channel for a little bit now, you probably saw that I posted a whole bunch of Cat Quest 3 videos recently. This is a role-playing game. It was released in 2025 on the Mac App Store. It's another small indie title, only 2 gig in size. Of course, it runs flawlessly on the M2. You can set all the graphics to maximum, you know, no compromises. It looks great. It runs well. It's an isometric action RPG, very similar to something like Diablo, and you know that Diablo is a game I really enjoy. This one features a cat who's a pirate going on this adventure, and it has this sort of hand-drawn look and charm to it. The combat is very fast and addictive. There's plenty of little customizations you can make. There's exploration, lots of little side quests. The whole story is very funny. It's featuring a lot of lovable characters. Frankly, it's basically a bite-sized Diablo-style experience. That's how I would describe it. Diablo being my all-time favorite game franchise, this here, it just hits all the right notes for me. And you don't have to invest hundreds and hundreds of hours into it like Diablo. This is a smaller experience, but it's so enjoyable. I had such a great time with it. It deserves my top spot for 2025. We'll see if it stays up in the top spot come 2026. We don't know. But yeah, definitely going to be my top game of 2025. And again, we're not talking about just games released in 2025 here. It's everything that's available on the Mac App Store today. It just so happens that Cat Quest 3 did release in 2025. So that is my list of top 10 games on the Mac App Store. You can see all my categories here. Captain Blood, Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil Village, Resident Evil 4, Grid Legends, Wuthering Waves, Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown, Control, Dredge, and Cat Quest 3. Pretty funny when you look at this. You see I have 2 indie titles at the very top. Kind of goes to show how my gaming preferences have changed. But as I've gotten older and I have much less time to play games, I'm gravitating a lot more to those, smaller experiences, those indie titles. They don't demand a lot of your attention. I really appreciate that. Again, maybe it's just because I'm getting old, but I'm very happy with this place that I'm in, because these types of games wouldn't have been things that I really gravitated towards many, many years ago, but now I'm falling in love with them. What do you think about the games that I put in this list? Let me know. I'm looking forward to 2026. There have been so many great games coming to the Mac App Store. I know a lot of people who hear, I like to play games on the Mac. It's very unusual because, the Macs are underpowered. They don't have a lot of game selection. But frankly, in my opinion, that's the thing that makes it so interesting. It's like you're on the ground floor. I just think it's really exciting to be a part of that. If you're someone who wants to make videos or talk about games that are available on PC or console or whatever else, there are so many games on those platforms already, right? It's so overwhelming. But with the Mac, it's almost like you're growing with the industry at the same time. So having less games, it's almost a blessing, because you can kind of see everything evolve and develop in real time. You're right there along with it. And as someone who doesn't have a lot of time to play games, but someone who still really enjoys games, the Mac offers this perfect experience for someone like me. But that's it. I'll see you in the next video, and Happy New Year, everyone.